Remember when dinner could be on the table in 10 minutes flat and it actually tasted like love? When cookbooks promised quick meals that delivered comfort, not just convenience? These weren't microwave shortcuts or drive-through solutions. These were real recipes that real families depended on, hidden away in church cookbooks, homemaker guides, and those well-worn recipe boxes that lived next to the stove. Back then, 10 minutes meant something different in the kitchen. It meant using what you had, wasting nothing, and somehow making magic happen between the can opener and the dinner bell. Depression-era breakfast miracles. Back when a dime could buy dinner for a family of 4, home cooks mastered the art of speed and thrift, like their lives depended on it because they did. These weren't just recipes, they were survival strategies wrapped in the warmth of a home-cooked meal. Morning came early for Depression-era families, and breakfast had to be fast, filling, and cheap enough to leave room in the budget for lunch and dinner. Milk toast with brown sugar. You'd take day-old bread, the kind that was getting a little hard around the edges, toast it golden in whatever pan you had, then soak it in warm milk sweetened with whatever sugar was left in the bowl. It sounds simple because it was, but for families during the 1930s, this was breakfast, lunch, or dinner when there wasn't much else. The bread would soften just enough to hold together, but not so much that it fell apart on the spoon. Kids loved how the toast got sweet and creamy. Mothers loved how it used up the milk that was about to turn. And fathers loved that it filled bellies without emptying wallets. You could make a whole pan in under 5 minutes, serve it warm with a sprinkle of cinnamon if you had it, and somehow it felt like a treat even when it was really just making do. Some families added a pat of butter if they had any. Others stirred in a beaten egg while the milk was still hot, creating something that was part French toast, part pudding, and entirely practical. Cornmeal mush patties. Take yesterday's cornmeal mush, the thick, creamy porridge that had cooled overnight into something you could slice with a knife. Cut it into thick rounds and fry it in whatever grease you had, bacon fat if you were lucky, lard if you weren't, butter if it was Sunday. The outside would crisp up golden and crunchy, while the inside stayed creamy and warm, creating a contrast that made your mouth pay attention even when your wallet was empty. During the Depression, cornmeal was a cheap, versatile ingredient that could stretch across multiple meals, and this recipe became a staple breakfast for families who understood that yesterday's dinner could become today's treasure. Some served it with molasses drizzled on top, the dark sweetness soaking into the crispy exterior. Others used the last bit of syrup, carefully rationed from a bottle that had to last the whole month. But most just ate it plain and called it good because it was filling. It was fast, and it turned leftovers into something that felt new and intentional. 1-egg pancakes, when eggs were precious and flour was counted by the cup. Clever cooks learned to make pancakes that stretched 1 egg across enough batter to feed the whole family. You'd beat that single egg until it was light and fluffy, add just enough milk to make it pour, stir in flour until it held together, and a pinch of salt, because even the humblest food deserved seasoning. The pancakes came out thin, more like crepes than the thick stacks we know today, but they were tender and golden and somehow more satisfying than anything that came from a box. Kids would eat them rolled up with whatever jam was left in the jar, or sprinkled with sugar if there wasn't any jam. These pancakes proved that limitation could breed creativity, that less could actually be more when it was made with care and intention. Fried bread with bacon grease. When butter was a luxury and fresh bread was gone, day-old slices got a second life in the skillet. You'd heat up the precious bacon grease that was saved like liquid gold, slide in the bread, and fry it until both sides were golden and crispy. The bread would soak up just enough grease to taste rich without getting soggy, creating something that was part toast, part treat, and entirely satisfying. This wasn't just breakfast, it was proof that nothing, absolutely nothing, should go to waste. The smoky flavor from the bacon fat transformed ordinary bread into something special, something that made you forget you were eating yesterday's leftovers. Some families sprinkled it with salt, others with sugar, but everyone understood that this simple combination could turn the humblest ingredients into comfort that lasted all morning. Oatmeal water pancakes. When you ran out of milk, but still had oatmeal and the family needed breakfast, resourceful cooks discovered that water could create pancakes that were hearty, filling, and surprisingly delicious. You'd cook the oatmeal with water until it was soft and creamy, let it cool just enough to handle, then stir in a beaten egg and enough flour to make it hold together. The result was pancakes with texture and substance, nutty and wholesome in a way that regular pancakes never quite achieved. These weren't fluffy, they were dense and satisfying, the kind of breakfast that stayed with you through a long morning of hard work. Kids learned to love them with whatever sweetener was available, honey, if the bees had been good to you, molasses, if money was tight, or just plain if that's all there was. Lunch solutions for empty pantries. Lunch during the Depression wasn't about sandwiches from the deli or salads from a bag. It was about taking whatever was left from breakfast and dinner and creating something that felt like a real meal. These recipes prove that creativity and hunger make the best cooking teachers. Potato water soup. Don't you dare throw away that starchy, cloudy water from boiling potatoes. Our grandmothers would have called you wasteful, and they would have been right. That murky liquid was liquid gold, full of nutrients and flavor that could become the base for soup that filled bellies and warmed hearts. You'd save the potato water, add whatever vegetables were on hand, maybe some diced onions if you had them, canned tomatoes if you could afford them, or just salt and pepper if that's all there was. The starch from the potatoes would thicken the soup naturally, creating something substantial enough to serve with pride. In 10 minutes, you had soup that stuck to your ribs and reminded you that nothing, absolutely nothing, should go to waste in a kitchen where every ingredient was precious. Bean water gravy. The liquid from cooking dried beans was too valuable to pour down the drain. It was protein-rich, flavorful, and could be transformed into gravy that made plain bread feel like a feast. You'd take that cloudy, nutritious liquid and thicken it with a little flour, season it with salt and whatever herbs you could find, and cook it until it was smooth and rich. Poured over biscuits or toast, this gravy turned a meager meal into something satisfying. It tasted like comfort and ingenuity, like making something from nothing and being proud of the result. Vinegar and sugar sandwiches. When fruit was expensive and jam was a luxury, kids learned to love sandwiches made with nothing but bread, a sprinkle of sugar, and a few drops of vinegar. The combination sounds strange until you taste it. The vinegar provided the tartness that made your mouth water, the sugar gave sweetness that satisfied cravings, and together they created a flavor that was surprisingly addictive. These sandwiches were packed in lunch pails across America, wrapped in wax paper, and eaten with the kind of satisfaction that comes from making the best of what you have. Lard and salt sandwiches. Before we understood cholesterol and heart disease, lard was simply rendered pork fat that added richness and flavor to anything it touched. Spread thick on bread and sprinkled with salt, it created sandwiches that were filling, satisfying, and surprisingly tasty. The lard would soften at room temperature, creating a spread that was smooth and rich, while the salt brought out flavors that made your taste buds pay attention. These weren't gourmet, they were survival food that somehow managed to taste like comfort. Mayonnaise and onion sandwiches. When butter was scarce or too expensive, mayonnaise became the spread of choice for families who still wanted their sandwiches to taste like something special. Thick mayonnaise mixed with thinly sliced onions created a combination that was tangy, creamy, and had enough bite to make you forget you were eating the simplest possible lunch. The onions added crunch and sharpness that cut through the richness of the mayonnaise, creating a balance that was surprisingly sophisticated for something made from pantry staples. Wartime ingenuity. When rationing sparked kitchen magic. World War II changed everything about American cooking, but it didn't break our spirit or our ability to create delicious meals. When sugar was rationed and meat was scarce, home cooks got creative in ways that would make today's food bloggers weep with envy. These recipes weren't just about they were about making it delicious, proving that limitation often breeds the most innovative solutions. Butter stretcher spread. When your monthly butter ration had to last and every pat was precious, clever homemakers discovered they could double their supply with nothing more than gelatin, milk, and a little kitchen magic. The recipe begins with butter or margarine and then incorporates milk, salt, and gelatin to stretch the original ingredient further. You'd soften the gelatin in cold water, heat the milk just enough to dissolve it, then whip it all together with the butter until it was light and fluffy. The result was spread that looked like butter, tasted like butter, but somehow went twice as far. It was lighter in color and texture, easier to spread straight from the refrigerator, and fooled everyone at the dinner table into thinking there was plenty when there really wasn't. This wasn't just stretching ingredients, it was stretching hope, proving that ingenuity could triumph over scarcity. Mock apple pie from crackers. When fresh apples were hard to find or too expensive, resourceful bakers discovered that saltine crackers could be transformed into pie filling that tasted remarkably like the real thing. You'd break up the crackers, soak them in a syrup made from sugar, water, lemon juice, and cinnamon, then bake them in a pie crust until the whole kitchen smelled like autumn. The crackers would soften and absorb the flavors, creating a texture that was surprisingly similar to cooked apples. Kids couldn't tell the difference. Adults marveled at the ingenuity, and everyone agreed that sometimes the best recipes are the ones that shouldn't work, but somehow do. This pie proved that creativity could overcome almost any shortage, that the taste of home didn't depend on having the perfect ingredients. Victory Garden Succotash. When canned vegetables were rationed and every tin was precious, home cooks turned to their backyard gardens and created succotash that celebrated whatever was ripe and ready. Fresh corn kernels cut from the cob, lima beans still tender and green, diced tomatoes warm from the vine, all tossed together in a hot skillet with a tablespoon of bacon grease if you were lucky enough to have it. The vegetables cooked fast, retaining their color and crunch, their individual flavors melding into something that was greater than the sum of its parts. This wasn't just a side dish. It was a celebration of self-sufficiency, proof that Victory Gardens could provide not just nutrition, but genuine pleasure at the dinner table. Spam and potato skillet. Canned meat might not sound glamorous, but during wartime it was protein that didn't require rationing stamps, and creative cooks learned to make it sing. Diced spam, fried until the edges were crispy, mixed with sliced potatoes and onions, seasoned with whatever spices were available, all cooked together until everything was golden and fragrant. The spam added saltiness and richness, the potatoes provided substance, and the onions brought sweetness that balanced the flavors. This was comfort food that used shelf-stable ingredients, proving that good meals didn't require fresh meat or perfect vegetables. Carrot cake cookies. Sugar rationing made dessert a challenge, but carrots added natural sweetness and moisture to simple drop cookies that satisfied sweet cravings without breaking rationing rules. Grated carrots, finely chopped so they almost disappeared into the batter, mixed with whatever flour you had, a beaten egg, and a pinch of cinnamon, created cookies that baked in 8 minutes and disappeared even faster. Kids didn't know they were eating vegetables, they just knew these cookies were soft, sweet, and somehow always available when other treats weren't. The carrots added color, nutrition, and a subtle sweetness that made these cookies special, proof that vegetables could be dessert when creativity met necessity. Cottage cheese victory salad. When fresh lettuce was hard to find and vegetables were precious, cottage cheese became the base for salads that were protein-rich rich, satisfying, and surprisingly delicious. Mixed with diced vegetables from the Victory Garden, radishes for crunch, tomatoes for acidity, green onions for bite, it created a meal that was fresh, filling, and entirely homegrown. The cottage cheese provided creaminess and protein, while the vegetables added color, texture, and the kind of freshness that reminded you why gardens mattered. This wasn't just salad, it was victory on a plate, proof that families could feed themselves well even when store shelves were empty. Mid-century marvels, the golden age of kitchen shortcuts. The 1950s brought prosperity and new product, but somehow the best recipes were still the fastest ones. These were the dishes that graced church cookbooks, bridge club luncheons, and hurried weeknight dinners when life was supposed to be easier but somehow wasn't. This was the era of convenience foods and labor-saving devices, but the smartest cooks still knew that the best meals came from simple ingredients combined with clever techniques. Deviled ham pinwheels. Take soft white bread, the kind that came sliced and wrapped in wax paper. Roll it flat with a rolling pin until it was thin enough to bend without breaking. Spread it with that pink, salty deviled ham from the small can. Roll it up like a jelly roll and slice into neat spirals that looked like roses made of meat. Stick a colored toothpick in each one, and suddenly you had party food that looked like you spent hours when you really spent minutes. These little bites were the stars of baby showers, church socials, and any gathering where the hostess needed to look competent without breaking a sweat. The deviled ham was salty and rich. The bread provided neutral background, and the spiral shape made them look far more sophisticated than their humble ingredients suggested. Cheese ball appetizers. Mix cream cheese with whatever you had grated cheddar for sharpness, chopped olives for brine, maybe some dried beef for saltiness, rolled it all into balls the size of walnuts, and rolled those balls in crushed crackers or chopped nuts until they looked like something from a fancy restaurant. Stick them in the refrigerator for 20 minutes to firm up and serve them like you were hosting royalty. The 1950s loved anything you could eat with your fingers, anything that looked elegant but didn't require actual cooking skills. These cheese balls delivered sophistication in bite-sized packages, proof that presentation could elevate the simplest ingredients into party food. Tuna crescent rolls. Canned tuna, the kind that came in oil and actually tasted like fish, mixed with a package of those new refrigerated crescent rolls that unrolled like magic, maybe some diced celery for crunch, a spoonful of mayonnaise to bind it all together, mix it all up, wrap portions in the triangular dough, and bake until golden and puffy. These were the answer to "What's for lunch?" When the cupboard looked bare, but you still needed to feed the family something that felt intentional. The tuna provided protein, the rolls made it feel like real food, and the whole thing could be ready faster than you could set the table properly. Jell-O parfait cups. Layer instant Jell-O, the kind that set in an hour instead of overnight, with whatever you had: cottage cheese for protein, canned fruit for sweetness, maybe some whipped topping if you were feeling fancy or expecting company. These parfait cups weren't just dessert, they were proof that presentation could turn the simplest ingredients into something special, something that looked like you understood the difference between everyday meals and company food. Every church cookbook from 1955 to 1965 had at least 12 variations on this theme, because every homemaker understood that Jell-O could be dressed up or down depending on what the occasion required. Hot dog roll-ups. Slice a hot dog lengthwise, but not all the way through, creating a pocket that could hold treasure. Stuff it with cheese, whatever kind you had: American for mildness, cheddar for sharpness. Wrap it in bacon if you had any. Secure it with toothpicks and broil until everything was bubbly and golden. It was protein layered on protein, comfort multiplied by comfort, and just enough fancy to make the kids feel like dinner was an event rather than just fuel. Some mothers served these with mustard for tangy contrast, others with ketchup for sweetness, but everyone served them with pride because they looked like restaurant food but took less time than setting the table with the good plates. Pineapple upside-down cake in a skillet, melt butter in a cast-iron skillet, sprinkle with brown sugar until it looked like autumn leaves, arrange pineapple rings like golden circles, pour cake batter over the whole thing, and bake until the top was golden and the bottom was caramelized. When you flipped it out of the pan, the pineapple and sugar created a glaze that looked professional and tasted like vacation. This wasn't just cake, it was showmanship, proof that dessert could be dramatic without being difficult. Breakfast solutions for busy mornings. Before there were breakfast bars and instant everything, before drive-through coffee and grab-and-go anything, there were these clever morning solutions that turned the first meal of the day into something worth waking up for, even when time was short and patience was shorter. These recipes understood that breakfast needed to be fast, filling, and foolproof, because mornings were for getting ready, not for complicated cooking. Pancake sandwiches. Make regular pancakes, but cook them small, like the size of your palm, so they were manageable and portable. While they're still warm and tender, spread one with butter that melted immediately into the hot surface. Add jam or honey or whatever sweetness you had available, top with another pancake to create a sandwich, and wrap the whole thing in wax paper. Kids could eat them walking to school, parents could grab them heading to work, and somehow they felt more substantial than regular toast, more special than ordinary pancakes. The syrup was inside where it belonged, contained and controlled. The mess was minimal, and breakfast became portable decades before anyone thought to call it a breakfast sandwich. These pancake sandwiches proved that convenience didn't have to mean compromising on comfort. Fried egg sandwiches with gravy. Fry an egg in whatever fat you had, slide it onto buttered toast while the yolk was still runny, and top with white gravy made from the pan, drippings flour stirred into the remaining fat, milk added slowly until it thickened, seasoned with salt and pepper until it tasted like comfort. This was diner food at home, comfort that started the day right and stuck with you through the morning. The egg yolk mixed with the gravy when you cut into it, the toast soaked up all the flavors, and for 10 minutes you could pretend you were sitting at a counter stool instead of rushing to catch the morning bus. This breakfast had substance, richness, and the kind of satisfaction that made you feel ready for whatever the day might bring. Oatmeal pancakes. When you ran out of pancake mix but still had oatmeal and the family expected something that felt like Sunday morning, you ground up the oats in whatever you had, a blender if you were modern, a rolling pin, and some determination if you weren't. Mix the ground oats with an egg, some milk, a pinch of salt for flavor enhancement, and you had pancakes that were hearty, healthy, and somehow more satisfying than the regular kind. They had texture that made your teeth work a little, substance that filled you up properly, and they proved that breakfast didn't need to be complicated to be good. These pancakes had a nutty flavor that was more interesting than plain flour, and they stuck with you longer than their fluffy counterparts. Cinnamon milk toast. Toast bread until golden and fragrant. Spread with butter while it was still hot enough to melt it immediately. Sprinkle with cinnamon and sugar until it looked like autumn. Then pour warm milk over the whole thing until it was soft but not soggy, tender but still holding together. This was comfort food for sick days, busy days, and days when you just needed something warm and sweet to start things right. Kids loved it because it tasted like dessert for breakfast. Mothers loved it because it used up day-old bread and leftover milk. And everyone loved it because it was ready faster than complaints about being hungry could turn into real grumpiness. Scrambled egg patties. Beat eggs with a little milk for tenderness. Pour into a hot skillet like you're making a pancake instead of scrambled eggs. Let it set without stirring. Flip it carefully like a pancake, and serve it like a neat round egg patty that fit perfectly on toast or a biscuit. No stirring, no scrambling, no messy curds scattered around the pan, just a neat, manageable circle of cooked egg that was easier to serve and somehow felt more intentional than traditional scrambled eggs. It was faster because you weren't constantly stirring, neater because everything stayed in one piece, and somehow felt more purposeful than the usual morning egg preparation. Fried cornmeal mush. Take yesterday's cornmeal mush, the thick porridge that had set up overnight, into something you could slice cleanly, cut it into rectangles, and fry it in a hot skillet until both sides were golden and crispy. The outside would develop a crust that cracked when you bit into it, while the inside remained creamy and warm, creating a texture contrast that woke up your mouth and made you pay attention to breakfast. Some people served it with syrup like pancakes, others with butter and salt like hash browns, but everyone agreed that it transformed leftover porridge into something that felt new and special. Lunchbox heroes and quick dinner saves. These were the recipes that saved dinner time when the clock was ticking, the family was hungry, and the refrigerator looked like it had given up on life. They turned pantry staples into family favorites and proved that speed and satisfaction could live in the same recipe, that dinner didn't have to be elaborate to be memorable. Spam and egg salad sandwiches. Dice up canned spam into small cubes, getting rid of any gelatinous coating and creating uniform pieces that would distribute evenly. Mix with chopped hard-boiled eggs that had been cooked ahead and cooled, add enough mayonnaise to bind it all together into a spreadable consistency, and maybe some chopped pickle for zing and crunch. The combination sounds unlikely until you taste it. The spam provided saltiness and richness, the eggs added protein and creaminess, and the pickles brought acidity that brightened the whole mixture. Spread it thick on bread, and you had lunch that traveled well, lasted all day without refrigeration, and somehow tasted better than the sum of its parts. This was protein, flavor, and convenience, all wrapped up in wax paper. Proof that good sandwiches could come from the most humble ingredients. Creamed chip beef. Made with dried and salted beef that came in small jars, creamed chipped beef was an easy and cheap dish that stretched expensive protein into a meal that could feed the whole family. You'd make a white sauce from butter, flour, and milk, using the classic roux technique that turned simple ingredients into something rich and satisfying. Add the salty, chewy, dried beef, letting it warm through and flavor the sauce, and serve it over toast that was sturdy enough to hold up under the weight of comfort. Military families knew this as SOS, but home cooks knew it as dinner when time was short and the grocery budget was shorter. The sauce was creamy and rich, the beef added texture and saltiness, and the toast provided a neutral base that soaked up all the flavors. Salmon patty melts. Mix canned salmon with a beaten egg for binding, some cracker crumbs for texture and to stretch the expensive fish, and whatever seasonings you had: onion powder, pepper, maybe some fresh dill if you were lucky. Form the mixture into patties, handling them gently so they held together. Fry until golden and crispy on the outside, then top with cheese, whatever kind you preferred, and let it melt into a bubbly golden layer. Serve on toasted bread with a pickle on the side, and you had dinner that felt like restaurant food, but came from ingredients that lived in every well-stocked pantry. The fish was mild and flaky, the cheese was creamy and rich, and the whole thing was ready faster than you could complain about what's for dinner. Bean and cornbread skillet. Open a can of beans, whatever kind you had. Navy beans for mildness, kidney beans for earthiness, baked beans for sweetness. Pour them into a hot skillet with a little bacon fat or butter for richness. Crumble yesterday's cornbread on top like a rustic stuffing, and heat until everything was warm and the cornbread had soaked up some of the bean liquid. This was one-pot cooking before anyone called it that. Comfort food that used up leftovers and turned them into something that felt planned and purposeful. The beans provided protein and fiber, the cornbread added sweetness and substance, and the combination created something that was more satisfying than either ingredient alone. Egg drop soup. Egg drop soup was made by whisking beaten eggs into a pot of boiling broth or salted water, creating ribbons of cooked egg that floated like golden clouds in the clear liquid. The eggs would cook instantly in the hot liquid, creating a light, protein-rich soup with limited ingredients that somehow felt more substantial than its simplicity suggested. When you needed something warm and filling but the cupboard was nearly bare, this soup delivered protein, comfort, and satisfaction in under 10 minutes. Some added a few vegetables if they had them, others kept it simple and pure, but everyone agreed it tasted like caring when caring was all you had to give. Potato pancakes. Grate raw potatoes into shreds, squeeze out as much water as possible using a clean kitchen towel, mix with a beaten egg and a little flour to hold everything together, and fry spoonful in hot oil until they were crispy and golden. These weren't just pancakes, they were a way to turn humble potatoes into something special, something that felt like a treat, even when it was really just making dinner from whatever was in the root cellar. The outside would crisp up beautifully while the inside stayed tender, and they could be served with anything from applesauce to sour cream to just salt and pepper. Sweet endings, desserts that delivered joy fast. When life was hard and money was tight, dessert wasn't a luxury, it was proof that sweetness could still exist in the world, that families could still celebrate even when there wasn't much to celebrate. These quick treats turned ordinary ingredients into extraordinary endings to ordinary meals, proving that happiness could be mixed up in a bowl and ready in minutes. Water pie, the most mysterious dessert to ever come out of American kitchens, water pie sounds like something that shouldn't work, but somehow creates magic from the most basic ingredients. The flavor of this pie is buttery, almost like a cookie fresh out of the oven, rich and satisfying in a way that defies explanation. Aside from the crust, all you need is water, butter, sugar, flour, and vanilla ingredients so simple they sound like a joke until you taste the result. The filling would set up creamy and sweet during baking, the flavor was impossible to place but definitely delicious, and guests would spend the entire evening trying to figure out what made it so good. The secret was that there was no secret, just proof that sometimes the best recipes are the ones that shouldn't work but somehow do, that chemistry and heat can transform the most basic ingredients into something that tastes like pure comfort. 5-minute fudge, condensed milk, chocolate chips, a pinch of salt to enhance the chocolate flavor, and whatever nuts you had, if you had any walnuts for richness, pecans for sweetness, or nothing at all if nuts were a luxury. Melt it all together in a double boiler, stirring constantly until it was smooth and glossy, pour it into a buttered pan, and wait just long enough for it to set into something that could be cut into neat squares. This fudge recipe appeared in countless mid-century cookbooks because it delivered candy store results with kitchen cupboard ingredients, because it was foolproof and fast and always impressive. Kids could make it themselves without supervision, mothers could whip it up when company was coming unexpectedly, and everyone could pretend they were more sophisticated than they really were. The fudge was rich and smooth, sweet, but not cloying, and it proved that homemade candy didn't require candy thermometers or professional techniques. Bread pudding cups, day-old bread torn into bite-sized pieces, mixed with milk that had been warmed just enough to dissolve the sugar, eggs beaten until they were light and frothy, sugar for sweetness, and whatever spices lived in the cupboard, cinnamon for warmth, nutmeg for complexity, vanilla for comfort. Pour the mixture into individual cups or ramekins and bake just long enough for the tops to brown and the centers to set. Bread pudding turned stale bread into a tasty dessert, transforming what might have been waste into something that felt like luxury. This was thrift disguised as indulgence, waste turned into want, and proof that the humblest ingredients could create the most satisfying endings to simple meals. Applesauce cookies. Mix applesauce with flour, sugar, and whatever spices you had, cinnamon for warmth, cloves for complexity, allspice for depth, drop spoonfuls onto a cookie sheet, and bake until they were just set but still tender. These cookies were soft, spiced, and somehow tasted like fall even in the middle of winter, like apple orchards and harvest time and all the comfort that comes with seasonal abundance. They used up the applesauce that was about to go bad, created treats that lasted for days without getting stale, and proved that fruit could make dessert feel healthier even when it really wasn't. The cookies had a cake-like texture that was more interesting than regular sugar cookies, and they filled the kitchen with the kind of aroma that made everyone gather around the stove. Chocolate gravy, cocoa powder, sugar, flour for thickening, and milk cooked together until thick and smooth, then poured over hot biscuits for a dessert that was part breakfast, part candy, and entirely Southern. This was comfort food that blurred the lines between meal and treat, between practical and indulgent, between breakfast and dessert. Kids would clean their plates, hoping for seconds. Adults would pretend they were just finishing what the children couldn't eat. And everyone would agree that sometimes the best desserts are the ones that break all the rules. The gravy was rich and sweet, with enough chocolate flavor to satisfy serious cravings, and it turned ordinary biscuits into something that felt like celebration. Depression cake, also called crazy cake or wacky cake, this chocolate cake was made without eggs, butter, or milk ingredients that were expensive or hard to find during tough times. Instead, it used oil, vinegar, and baking soda to create a cake that was surprisingly moist, rich, and delicious. The vinegar reacted with the baking soda to create lift, the oil added moisture that lasted for days, and somehow the absence of traditional ingredients made the chocolate flavor more intense, more focused. This cake proved that limitation could inspire innovation, that the best recipes sometimes come from making do with what you have rather than following traditional rules. Beverages and refreshments. When store-bought drinks were expensive and water got boring, creative homemakers knew how to make beverages that felt special without breaking the budget. These drinks turned simple ingredients into refreshments that made ordinary meals feel more festive. Switchel, made from water, apple cider vinegar, honey or molasses, and ginger, Switchel was the original sports drink, popular with farmers and laborers who needed something that would quench thirst and replace electrolytes lost through hard work. The vinegar provided tang, the sweetener gave energy, and the ginger added a warming bite that made you feel alert and refreshed. Mixed up in a big pitcher and kept cool in the root cellar, Switchel was ready whenever someone needed refreshment that was more interesting than water, but less expensive than store-bought alternatives. Mint tea, fresh mint from the garden, steeped in hot water until the liquid turned pale green and smelled like summer, sweetened with whatever you had: sugar, honey, or molasses. This tea was refreshing, hot or cold, soothing for upset stomachs, and cost nothing more than the effort to grow mint in a kitchen garden. Served over ice in tall glasses, it was elegant enough for company, but simple enough for everyday refreshment. Lemonade concentrate. When lemons were available and affordable, smart homemakers made concentrate that could be stored and used to make fresh lemonade whenever the family wanted something special. Sugar, lemon juice, and a little lemon zest boiled together until thick, then stored in jars and mixed with water as needed. This concentrate meant that lemonade could happen even when fresh lemons weren't available, turning special occasions into everyday possibilities. Coffee milk, Rhode Island's gift to the beverage world. Coffee milk was made by adding coffee syrup to cold milk, creating a drink that was part coffee, part milkshake, and entirely satisfying. The syrup was made from coffee grounds, sugar, and water, cooked down until it was thick and intensely flavored. Kids loved it because it tasted grown up but wasn't too strong. Adults loved it because it was cheaper than buying coffee and milk separately, and everyone loved it because it felt like a treat in a glass. Forgotten preservation techniques. Before refrigeration was reliable and affordable, families needed to know how to make food last, how to turn abundance into security, and how to preserve the harvest for lean times. These quick preservation methods didn't require special equipment or extensive knowledge, just common sense and the understanding that food was too precious to waste. Quick pickled vegetables, when the garden was producing more than the family could eat. Fresh, quick pickling saved vegetables from spoiling and added tangy flavor to winter meals. Slice cucumbers, onions, or radishes thin, pack them in jars with salt, sugar, and vinegar, and let them sit until they were crisp and sour. These pickles were ready in hours instead of weeks, didn't require processing or special equipment, and added bright acidity to heavy winter meals. The vegetables stayed crisp and fresh-tasting, the brine could be reused for the next batch, and the whole process turned potential waste into something that improved with time. Salt-cured herbs from the garden could be preserved in salt, creating seasoning blends that lasted through the winter and intensified in flavor over time. Layer fresh herbs with coarse salt in jars, packing tightly to exclude air, and the salt would draw out moisture while preserving the essential oils that gave herbs their flavor. Months later, you'd have herb salt that could season soups, stews, and roasts with the concentrated taste of summer gardens. Fruit leather. When fruit was ripe and abundant, it could be cooked down into thick paste, spread on plates, and dried in the sun or near the stove until it became chewy, sweet leather that would last for months. Apples, pears, even berries could be transformed this way, creating portable sweetness that traveled well and satisfied cravings for fruit when fresh was out of season. Kids loved it because it was like candy that parents actually encouraged them to eat, and parents loved it because it used up fruit that would otherwise spoil. Smoked salt. Before electric smokers and fancy equipment, families made smoked salt by burning hardwood chips in a covered pan and letting the smoke infuse coarse salt with deep, complex flavors. Salt could transform simple foods into something that tasted sophisticated, adding the essence of the smokehouse to vegetables, meats, and even desserts. The process was simple, but the results were impressive, proving that flavor enhancement didn't require expensive ingredients or complicated holiday and special occasion. Quick treats. Even during hard times, families found ways to make holidays and special occasions feel different from ordinary days. Quick treats used everyday ingredients to create foods that felt festive and special, proving that celebration was more about intention than expense. Christmas hard candy, sugar, water, and whatever flavoring you had. Peppermint extract for Christmas, lemon for summer, vanilla for every day, cooked to the hard crack stage, and poured onto buttered plates to cool. The candy would crack into irregular pieces that looked like jewels, tasted intensely of whatever flavoring you'd used, and made holidays feel special even when money was tight. Could help by greasing the plates and choosing the flavors, making candy making a family activity that created memories along with treats. Birthday cake in a cup. When ingredients for a full cake were too expensive or the occasion was too small for a whole cake, individual cupcakes made birthdays feel special without breaking the budget. Simple yellow cake batter divided among teacups or small bowls, baked until golden, and topped with whatever sweetness was available, jam, honey, or just a sprinkle of sugar. These personal-sized cakes made everyone feel special, turned small celebrations into big ones, and proved that size didn't determine the importance of an occasion. New Year's luck cookie. Simple sugar cookies with coins or written fortunes baked inside, these treats combined dessert with the hope that the new year would bring better fortune than the old one. The cookies were crisp and sweet. The surprises inside added excitement to eating them, and the tradition connected families to the idea that luck could be influenced by intention and hope. Easter egg bread. Bread dough shaped around colored hard-boiled eggs, creating loaves that looked festive and special. The eggs would cook further during baking, their shells taking on colors from the dough, and the bread would be rich and tender from the eggs baked within. This bread turned ordinary breakfast into something that felt like celebration, marked the season without requiring expensive decorations, and combined nutrition with festivity in a way that satisfied both practical and emotional needs. Emergency meals and pantry rescues. Every household faced times when the cupboard seemed bare, payday was still days away, and the family still needed to eat. These emergency meals turned the most basic pantry staples into something that felt like a real meal, proving that resourcefulness was the most important ingredient in any kitchen. Flour and water pancakes. When eggs were gone and milk was finished, pancakes could still happen with nothing more than flour, water, salt, and whatever fat you had for the pan. The pancakes were thin and tender, more like crepes than the fluffy stacks we know today, but they were warm and filling and somehow made breakfast feel possible even when the pantry was nearly empty. Served with whatever sweetener was available, they proved that comfort could come from the simplest combinations. Potato soup from scraps. Potato peelings, usually destined for the compost or the pigs, could be cleaned and boiled to make soup that was surprisingly nutritious and filling. The peelings contained vitamins and minerals that were concentrated just under the skin, and when cooked with onion scraps and seasoned with salt and pepper, they created soup that tasted like resourcefulness and ingenuity. This wasn't just making do, this was making the most of everything, understanding that waste was a luxury that hard times couldn't afford. Grease biscuits. When butter was gone and lard was finished, biscuits could still be made with whatever cooking grease was available: bacon fat for flavor, chicken fat for richness, even the fat rendered from salt pork. Biscuits would be tender and flaky, carrying the flavor of whatever fat was used, and they proved that good bread could happen even when traditional ingredients weren't available. These biscuits were comfort food that adapted to circumstances, proving that flexibility was as important as any recipe. Sugar water syrup. When maple syrup was too expensive and honey wasn't available, simple syrup made from sugar and water could sweeten pancakes, biscuits, and oatmeal. Cooked until slightly thick and flavored with whatever extract was available, this syrup wasn't fancy, but it made simple foods feel more special, turned plain into pleasant, and proved that sweetness could be created rather than just purchased. Onion gravy. When meat was scarce and drippings weren't available, gravy could still happen with just onions, flour, and patience. Slice onions thin and cook them slowly until they were golden and sweet. Add flour to make a roux, slowly add water or milk to create gravy that was rich with caramelized onion flavor. This gravy proved that vegetables could provide the depth and richness usually associated with meat, that patience could transform simple ingredients into something complex and satisfying. Children's favorites and nursery foods. Kids have always been picky eaters, but during times when food was scarce or money was tight, parents learned to make simple foods appealing and nutritious. These recipes understood that children needed foods that were mild, familiar, and somehow fun to eat. Milk, gravy, and biscuits. Simple white gravy made from flour, milk, and a little salt, poured over biscuits that were still warm from the oven. This combination was mild enough for young palates, filling enough to satisfy growing appetites, and comforting enough to make children feel secure even when times were uncertain. The gravy was creamy and rich, the biscuits were tender and buttery, and together they created a meal children associated with safety and love. Egg in a hole. Cut a circle from the center of a piece of bread, fry the bread in butter until golden, crack an egg into the hole, and cook until the white was set, the yolk was still runny. Kids loved this because it looked like something special, because they could help cut the holes, and because it combined familiar foods in an unexpected way. The bread was crispy and buttery, the egg was creamy and rich, and the whole thing felt like a treat disguised as breakfast. Cinnamon toast soldiers, toast cut into strips, buttered while still warm, and sprinkled with cinnamon sugar. These soldiers could be dipped into soft-boiled eggs or eaten plain as a snack. Children loved foods they could eat with their hands, and these toast strips satisfied that need while providing nutrition and comfort. The cinnamon made them feel like dessert, butter made them rich and satisfying, and the shape made them feel like play food that was actually good for you. Cornbread and milk. Crumbled cornbread served in a bowl with cold milk poured over it. This simple combination was Southern comfort food at its most basic. The cornbread would soften slightly but maintain its texture. The milk would take on a subtle corn sweetness, and children would eat it like cereal that actually filled them up. This wasn't just food, it was tradition, connecting children to generations of families who understood that simple combinations could create lasting comfort. Molasses cookies. Simple cookies made with molasses, flour, and whatever spices were available. These treats were soft, chewy, and not too sweet for young palates. Molasses was cheaper than sugar and added iron and other minerals to children's diets, making these cookies feel like medicine that actually tasted good. The cookies were dark and mysterious looking, which appealed to children's sense of adventure, but mild and familiar tasting, which satisfied their need for comfort. Regional specialties and local adaptations. Every region of America developed its own versions of quick, economical meals based on local ingredients and cultural traditions. These recipes tell the story of how immigrant families and regional preferences shaped American comfort food. Southern tomato gravy. In the South, where tomatoes grew abundantly and grease was saved religiously, tomato gravy became a way to use up overripe tomatoes and create something that was tangy, rich, and satisfying. Cook diced tomatoes in bacon grease until they broke down and became saucy. Thicken with a little flour, season with salt and pepper, and serve over biscuits or grits. This gravy was bright and acidic, cutting through the richness of the grease and creating a balance that woke up your taste buds and made simple foods feel complex. Midwest creamed. Fresh corn, cut from the cob, cooked in its own milk with butter and cream until it was rich and thick. This wasn't just corn, it was corn elevated to something special, something that could stand beside meat and potatoes as an equal partner in the meal. The natural sweetness of the corn was enhanced by the cream, the texture was smooth and luxurious, and the whole dish proved that vegetables could be just as satisfying as any protein. New England fish cakes, leftover fish mixed with mashed potatoes, formed into patties and fried until golden. These cakes were a way to stretch expensive fish into more servings, to use up potatoes that were getting soft, and to create something that felt new even when it was made from leftovers. The fish provided protein and flavor, the potatoes added substance and helped the cakes hold together, and the frying created a crispy exterior that contrasted beautifully with the tender interior. Western beans and bacon. Dried beans, cooked with whatever bacon or salt pork was available, seasoned with onions and whatever spices could be found or afforded. This was cowboy food, trail food, food that could be made with ingredients that traveled well and lasted long. The beans were hearty and filling, the bacon added richness and saltiness, and the whole dish proved that simple ingredients could create satisfaction that lasted through long days of hard work. Pennsylvania Dutch schnitz and knepp, dried apples cooked with dumplings until the fruit was tender and the dumplings were fluffy. This combination of sweet and savory, fruit and starch, was comfort food that satisfied multiple cravings at once. The apples added natural sweetness and tartness. The dumplings provided substance and warmth, and the whole dish connected families to European traditions while using ingredients that were readily available in America. If you're finding comfort in these forgotten flavors, make sure to hit that like button and let me know in the comments which of these regional specialties reminds you of your own family's cooking traditions. Medicinal foods and healing meals. Before modern medicine was widely available or affordable, families relied on food as medicine, creating meals that were designed to heal, comfort, and strengthen. These recipes understood that nutrition and medicine were often the same thing. Chicken soup for everything. A whole chicken simmered with vegetables until the meat fell off the bones and the broth was rich and golden. This wasn't just soup, it was medicine in a bowl, providing protein, vitamins, and the kind of comfort that could heal both body and spirit. The hot liquid helped with congestion, the protein supported healing, and the ritual of making and sharing soup created emotional comfort that was just as important as physical nutrition. Eggnog for invalids, rich custard made from eggs, milk, and whatever spirits were available, this drink was given to people who were sick or recovering from illness. The eggs provided protein and vitamins, the milk added calcium and calories, and the alcohol was believed to have medicinal properties. This wasn't party food. It was nutrition concentrated into something that was easy to swallow and digest when solid food was too difficult. Beef tea. Lean beef simmered in water until all the nutrients were extracted into a rich, dark broth. This concentrated nutrition was easier to digest than solid meat and was believed to provide strength to people who were weak or recovering from illness. The broth was sipped warm, often with a little salt for flavor, and represented the understanding that sometimes healing required concentrating nutrition into its most easily absorbed form. Toast water. Bread toasted until it was very dark, then steeped in hot water to create a mild, slightly bitter drink that was given to people with upset stomachs. The charcoal in the burnt toast was believed to settle digestive problems, and the liquid was easy on sensitive stomachs. This wasn't delicious, it was functional, representing the willingness to prioritize healing over pleasure when health was at stake. Barley water. Pearl barley simmered in water until the liquid was thick and starchy, then strained and flavored with lemon and honey. This drink was given to people with kidney problems, digestive issues, or fever, and was believed to be soothing and healing. The barley provided gentle nutrition, the liquid was easy to digest, and the preparation showed the care that families put into helping their loved ones heal. Seasonal adaptations and weather-appropriate food. Smart cooks understood that different seasons and weather conditions called for different kinds of food. These recipes adapted to the natural rhythms of the year, using what was available and creating foods that matched the needs of each season. Summer cold soups. When the weather was too hot for cooking or eating warm food, cold soups made from whatever vegetables were ripe provided nutrition and refreshment without heating up the kitchen. Cucumber soup made with buttermilk, tomato soup served chilled with fresh herbs, gazpacho made from garden vegetables. These soups were cooling, nutritious, and used up produce that was at its peak. Winter warming stews. When the weather was cold and the body needed warming from the inside out, hearty stews made from whatever meat and vegetables were available provided the calories and comfort needed to get through harsh winters. These stews were thick and rich, designed to stick to your ribs and provide energy for dealing with cold weather and hard work. Spring cleaning. Foods. After a winter of heavy, preserved foods, spring called for meals that were light and fresh, designed to cleanse the body and celebrate the return of fresh produce. Dandelion greens, fresh lettuce, early radishes, these foods were believed to purify the blood and refresh the system after months of heavier winter fare. Fall harvest preservation. When gardens were producing more than families could eat fresh, smart cooks knew how to preserve the abundance for winter use. Canning, drying, storing in root cellars, these techniques ensured that summer's plenty would sustain families through winter's scarcity. Holiday traditions and celebration foods. Even during the hardest times, families found ways to make holidays feel special, creating traditions that used simple ingredients to mark important occasions and create memories that lasted longer than any expensive gift. Christmas morning cinnamon rolls. Simple sweet dough rolled with cinnamon and sugar. These rolls could be prepared the night before and baked Christmas morning, filling the house with the smell of celebration before anyone was fully awake. The anticipation of Christmas morning was enhanced by the aroma of baking bread, and the tradition created consistency and comfort that children could depend on year after year. Birthday pancakes. On birthdays, regular pancakes became special by adding whatever treats were available, chocolate chips, if there were any, berries, if they were in season, or just extra butter and syrup, if that's all there was. The pancakes themselves weren't different, but the intention behind them was, proving that celebration was more about attention and care than about expensive ingredients. Easter bread, sweet bread, braided with colored eggs, baked right into the dough. This bread combined nutrition with celebration, turning ordinary breakfast into something that marked the season and the holiday. The eggs added richness and protein, the bread provided substance, and the braiding and coloring created beauty that made the meal feel special. 4th of July ice cream. When ice cream was a luxury that most families couldn't afford to buy, making it at home for special occasions turned the treat into an event. Simple custard made from eggs, milk, and sugar, frozen in hand-cranked machines, or even just in metal bowls surrounded by ice and salt. This ice cream was more than dessert. It was celebration, tradition, and the understanding that some occasions deserved extra effort. What we've lost isn't just recipes, it's the confidence to walk into a kitchen with whatever we have and trust that we can create something good. Our grandmothers didn't have meal kits or 15-ingredient shopping lists. They had ingenuity, determination, and the unshakable belief that any meal made with care was worth making. These 30 forgotten recipes and the dozens of others we've explored remind us that the best cooking happens not when we have everything, but when we make everything count. These recipes came from a time when waste was unthinkable, when creativity was necessity, and when the ability to make something from nothing was a survival skill that every homemaker needed to master. They represent more than just food. They represent a way of thinking about ingredients, about family, about the relationship between necessity and satisfaction. The 10-minute promise wasn't about convenience in the modern sense. It was about efficiency born from understanding ingredients so well that you could transform them quickly and confidently. It was about knowing that flour and water could become bread, that eggs could become dinner, that vegetables destined for the compost could become soup that satisfied both hunger and the soul. These recipes also tell the story of American resilience, of families who faced economic hardship, wartime rationing, and seasonal scarcity with creativity and determination. They found ways to make holidays special with simple ingredients, to turn leftovers into new meals, to satisfy children's cravings and adults' need for comfort without breaking budgets that were already stretched thin. What made these recipes work wasn't just the ingredients or the techniques. It was the understanding that food was about more than nutrition. It was about family, tradition, comfort, and the daily ritual of caring for the people you loved. Every meal was an opportunity to show love, to create comfort, to maintain traditions that connected families to their past and their community. The speed of these recipes wasn't about rushing through cooking. It was about understanding ingredients and techniques so well that good food could happen quickly and naturally. Our ancestors knew their kitchens, knew their ingredients, and knew how to combine them in ways that created satisfaction without waste or excess effort. Perhaps most importantly, these recipes remind us that good food doesn't require expensive ingredients or complicated techniques. It requires understanding, creativity, and the willingness to work with what you have rather than waiting for what you wish you had. They prove that limitation can inspire innovation, that necessity can mother not just invention, but genuine deliciousness. Today, when we're surrounded by endless choices and exotic ingredients, when we can buy prepared foods from around the world and have them delivered to our doors, these simple recipes offer something different. They offer the satisfaction that comes from creating rather than just consuming, from understanding rather than just following directions, from connecting with generations of cooks who faced similar challenges and found similar solutions. These forgotten recipes are more than just instructions for combining ingredients. They're lessons in resourcefulness, creativity, and the kind of practical wisdom that our great-grandmothers took for granted. They remind us that the best meals often come from the simplest beginnings, that speed and satisfaction aren't mutually exclusive, and that the most important ingredient in any recipe is the care and attention of the person making it. In our modern world of food blogs and celebrity chefs, of exotic ingredients and complicated techniques, these humble recipes offer something revolutionary. The idea that anyone can cook well with whatever they have, that good food doesn't require perfect ingredients or professional training, and that the most satisfying meals are often the simplest ones. Thanks for taking this delicious journey back in time with us, exploring these forgotten flavors and rediscovering the wisdom of cooks who understood that making do could mean making it delicious. If these recipes stirred up memories or sparked your curiosity about the way families used to eat, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our vintage adventures. Drop your favorite memory in the comments. Tell us about the simple meals that made your childhood special, the recipes your grandmother made when money was tight, or the forgotten flavors that still make you smile when you remember them. Which of these 30 recipes are you most excited to try? Which ones reminded you of your own family's cooking traditions? Next week, we're exploring the lost art of preserving summer in jars, diving into techniques our great-grandmothers used to make August last all winter long. We'll discover why they saved everything from pickle juice to fruit peels, how they turned abundance into security, and why their pantries were more reliable than any grocery store. Until then, keep cooking with heart. Remember that the best recipes are always the ones that bring us together, and never forget that the most important ingredient in any kitchen is the love and care of the person doing the cooking. The wisdom of the past is waiting to inspire your future meals, one simple, delicious recipe at a time.